How about if I just start at the beginning? you could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real World's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Welcome to episode 6 of Chasing Giants, brought to you by buyafarm.com. I have Don Higgins on the line. It's November 9th, and it's been a big week, Don.
Yeah, we talked last podcast about how slow October was, and I expected things to take off, and that this past week would be the best week of the whole rut to hunt.
Yeah, it's been exactly a week since we've been on the line, and sure how things have changed very, very quickly for you.
Yeah, it was last Saturday midday that we recorded the last podcast, and the next morning, Sunday morning, I ended up shooting a buck and filled my first tag. And then on the very next day, on Monday afternoon, I shot my second buck here in Illinois and filled my second buck tag.
Yeah, and before we get into the specific stories, I know everybody's been sending messages and you've posted pictures of the two deer, but really haven't told the full story of either one of those bucks. Let's recap a little bit in episode 5 what we were talking about. And, you know, we talked a little bit about leaning into adversity, and one of the things that we had talked about is how horrible the results were to our goals for the month of October. And when I left your house last Saturday evening after we sat down and had some supper, I think to quote you, I think you said you were going to hunt harder this last week than you've ever hunted in your life because you had a feeling about how good it was going to be.
Yeah, I knew that things were going to turn on with the buck movement. I just had a feeling from past experience that, you know, things aren't slow forever. And October was so bad that I figured when things turned on, they'd really turn on. So the time of the season was right. You know, the 7th and the 8th are my favorite days of the whole year to hunt, and those were last week. So the days leading up to that, I just knew it was going to turn on, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that was November 2nd, and you were in 1-360 hunting blind with Frank Archie, our buddy from Lone Wolf, and I was in another one. How far away are they? We can't really see each other, but we're on each side of a switchgrass bedding area.
Yeah, they're probably, I don't know what, at least 300 yards apart, maybe 400.
The way the bird flies. But, yeah, we saw deer that night. But, boy, how things changed for Sunday morning. I traveled back over to another farm that I hunt about an hour away. And, boy, how things changed when I got that early text from you not too long after the sun came up.
Yeah, I had action before the sun even came up. I slipped into my stand that morning and just got settled in, and I could hear antlers banging on something. You know, you can tell when it's a big, heavy set of antlers or a couple of dinks. And I couldn't tell if it was two bucks sparring or what was going on, but I ended up deciding that this buck was rubbing this tree, and it just sounded like somebody was taking a wooden baseball bat and just banging it against this oak tree. But so I'm sitting there in the dark listening to this go on, and then another direction from me at the same time there was two bucks sparring, and they were younger bucks. You could just tell by the sound that their racks weren't all that big, but the big guy was over there beating up this tree. And you know, as the sun came up, you still there?
Yeah.
I lost you for a second or something. My phone's beeping.
Somebody's trying to call you asking you about your bucks.
Yeah, that's probably right. But anyway, the doe started showing up, and it wasn't 10 minutes after shooting light, and here comes a 6-year-old buck that I'd been waiting to or trying to kill all the month of October.
Yeah, this was
And
actually the buck that we referenced a couple episodes that we saw opening weekend that we got on footage. I think the second night he got within 30 yards of us.
right, yeah, the first two times out we seen him, October 3rd and 4th, and after that he disappeared. Didn't see him again in October. But on this hunt, here he comes 10 minutes after shooting light. He was walking by at 20 yards, and I put an arrow right in his chest, and he didn't go maybe 100 yards or so. Um, but there was so much activity that morning. I just hung my bow up. I sat in the stand for 2 more hours. Just I didn't even put another arrow on the string. Just hung it up and was just watching the bucks go by. I think I seen 7 or 8 bucks that morning, and only one of them was a yearling and a couple 2-year-olds, and the rest of them are 3 years and older.
Right.
But it was like, talk about flipping a light switch from the day before. That's the day it happened.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this buck. We didn't officially name him, but last year as a 5-year-old, as we were talking about it, I started calling him, I think, the fork buck or the fork time buck. But he was 6 years old this year, and I believe you have 5 shed antlers off of him.
Yeah, I do. Last season, or the rack from last year, only found one of those, but I have 2 complete sets from the 2 years previous to that. And we called him the fork tine buck because he always had fork G2s, similar to Smokey. But this year, well, last year during the rut, you remember that he broke his leg. Actually, one of his back legs, just above the hock, he broke it, and then the leg was just kind of dangling out to the side. We wasn't sure if he was going to make it through the winter.
Right.
But Kyle Harmon got some fantastic footage of that buck with the broken leg and feeding in the real world soybeans in the snow last winter.
Yeah, I think for those of you who watch our the Real World Wildlife Products ads, and we've used the picture a couple times on social media, this buck was actually used in a picture for an ad for Gen 2 soybeans. I believe the picture was taken in January, like between New Year's and maybe the ATA show, I believe. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it was in January, and that probably is right as far as the timing.
So we were needing some late season footage and some pictures of the beans, and luckily the fork time buck came out. But that's when you had actually noticed he was limping. But with Kyle's photography equipment, we actually got really good footage and pictures of that back leg all buckled in. And even though he healed up and made it, he still had like a big knot and was kind of walking on the edge of his hoof even this fall.
Yeah, that it actually healed crooked. His hoof kind of stuck out to the side a little bit, and but the crazy thing is his antler growth was still real good on the one side, but due to that injury, the other side was very weak. A year ago, the shed I found a year ago was his weaker side, and I measured it and doubled it, and then gave him a 20-inch spread, and he was in the low 170s. I thought he would probably be about the same this year, even though the one side was weaker, the other side was pretty strong, and I thought he'd still probably be right around the 170 mark, and he ended up being 167, which is a great 6-year-old buck. I mean, I'm not complaining
Absolutely.
whatsoever. But
well, let's. I got a couple questions to just kind of enlighten us on, since you have such a history with this deer, because like Smokey, this was a deer that was on your home farm. It was one that we targeted to try to kill in an early season. But I believe 2 years in a row, this buck left the farm in October. I think last year he disappeared, and we didn't get him back until, I don't know, it was close to the end of October. And we kind of referenced it a little bit last episode that he was spotted a good ways away. So
Hmm.
talk to us a little bit about what you saw year to year with the fork tine buck, and if there was some similarities there that we can learn from.
Well, like you mentioned, the last 2 years he was there at the 1st of October, and then he left the farm. Had no idea where he went until a friend of mine actually seen him at night crossing the road and described him perfectly to me. So I knew he was talking about the same buck. But then he came back towards the end of October, 1st of November. Um, I can't explain why.
Right.
All these, every buck's different,
Right.
and that the greatest tool that we have as deer hunters is trail cameras, in my opinion. And by having a lot of trail cameras out over a pretty wide area, it's helped me to not only kill a lot of the bucks that I end up shooting, but just to learn more about them and how they travel. And the one thing I've learned is they're all individual.
Right.
They don't all do the same thing. That's for sure.
Yeah. The one thing we can all learn um, from this is, as deer shift, whether you have a homebody like Smokey was, where Smokey didn't really leave that much, to a buck that historically leaves, by having a property that's set up with bedding and food, you're increasing the chances that he's going to either summer or winter or come back and check for does there. And we kind of all see this try to get a year to year pattern, but the bottom line is we increase our odds when we have everything that deer needs and don't pressure it too much.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the late season, the food's pretty scarce around here after the farmers have worked all the crop fields. So I'll draw in a lot of deer, but also by having the bedding cover, undisturbed cover, that holds them here.
Right.
So I'll have more bucks here the last week of season than I will even during the rut or any other time of the year,
Right.
because they're here for the food and the security.
Yeah. So I think almost like Smokey and Trump, even though you had hunted for Trump many times before you actually saw him the first time, the buck you shot Monday evening was quite a bit different. I think that was the first time you'd ever hunted him, and he was not on a per se managed property.
Right. Last episode when I said, I was really going to start hunting hard the coming week, which was this past week, and I mentioned that I had 7 bucks in the 170-inch range that I was going to go after, and those 5 bucks were on 5 different properties. Um, this was one of them, and after I shot the fork tine buck, which was my first tag, and so I had 4 bucks left on 4 different properties to chase, and it just so happened that I needed different winds on each of those properties, so I was going to be bouncing around, and my plan was I was just going to bounce around on those different properties, hunting different bucks, and the first buck that came by and gave me a shot was going to get shot.
Right.
And so Monday afternoon, we got a wind. It was a westerly wind that allowed me to go up and hunt a property that it's not managed whatsoever. It's one I've got permission just by asking. I don't pay the lease or anything, but I also don't have any food plots on there, and I'm really limited on what kind of management I can do. As far as managing the cover or anything.
So this was the
Um,
day after you shot the fork tine buck. This was Monday, and I'm guessing that our friend Kyle from Team Radical was probably taking pictures that midday of the fork tine buck, right?
he did, yeah.
Yeah.
Monday midday, Kyle. I met with Kyle. He took pictures,
So
and
this is a hunt almost right after you got done taking hero shots with the first buck from the day before.
yeah. And the crazy thing is after I got done taking pictures, I took the deer to leave at the processor, and I wasn't even going to hunt. And I Wes Delks, our partner with Real World, was here at my place hunting. He was in a tree. He could actually see my house, and he sees me pull in, and I'm texting him, and said I wasn't going to hunt. I was going to help my wife do some things. Well, it just so happened she was done didn't need my help. And I thought, well, crap, I'm going to the woods. So Wes watches me get in my truck and drive away to go hunting. I texted him, said, I'm going to go hunt. My wife don't need my help, so I'm headed to the woods. And he watches me drive away, and I go to my hunting spot, which was about 5 miles away, and they get to my stand. I'm not in that stand 30 minutes, probably more like 20 minutes. And a 1.5-year-old buck walks right by me, and then just about 2 minutes behind him, here comes the buck I'm looking for.
Huh.
And it's unbelievable. And he walks right by it about 20, 25 yards, and I put an arrow right through his chest, and he busts out of the cover and runs out across a bean stubble field. And he gets out about 100 yards or so and starts doing circles and just tumbles over right there. And I called my dad, who wasn't that far away, and he came out, and we drove right to the buck, and he helped me drag him into the truck, and I drove home and was barely gone from the house an hour.
And Wes is still in the tree
and
stand.
Wes is still in the tree, and he sees me come back, and I texted him. I said, I'm back. I just shot another one. He couldn't believe it. I said, yeah, he's in the back of my truck. I'll show you when you get out, when you get done hunting. And so,
Well, I'll admit I was I rolled my eyes when I got the second text from you. I'm like, you have to be absolutely kidding me. But I knew it was true. I knew you weren't pranking me, but I was like, you got to be kidding me. Just 2 booners in 2 days, with everything else going on, that as you're trying to take care of the fork time buck, slip in there, but the interesting thing is the rut activity was hitting pretty hard though, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. And these bucks don't make the 170-inch Boone and Crockett minimum. The second one scored 168, but I'm not making excuses. I'm very happy with both those bucks. This buck was 5 years old. I mean, he was real world in every sense of the word. I don't think he ever ate from a food plot. If he did, I don't know where it would have been. And it was not leased ground, not ground I owned or anything like that. So I'm pretty proud to go into an area like that and come out with a 5-year-old buck that's pushing 170 inches.
Now the spot that you killed the second deer in, you said you had not hunted that stand ever, or this year?
Just this year.
Okay, so you were
I've
leaving
had that stand there for a while.
You were leaving that spot for the rut, or just?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
In 2015, I shot a buck on this property. It's a small property. I've only got 2 stands there for 2 different wind directions. And in 2015, I shot a 6-year-old 180-inch buck out of the other stand on this property. And that was also the first day that I'd ever hunted for that buck. I'd watched him grow up since he was a 1.5 years old. When he was a 1.5 years old, he had 6 points on one side, and I thought that's going to be a good buck one day. And I kept my eyes on him, and when he was a 6-year-old, the first morning I hunted for him, I shot him. And this buck was the same way. It was the first 30 minutes I hunted for this buck, and I ended up shooting him. It's just one of them properties that it's not good until the rut, and there's always does there. But if you go in too early and you put the does on high alert or run them out where they don't stay there anymore, well, you've already ruined your opportunity. So I just stay away.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to ask you is, in some parts of the country, the rut's in full swing. I've been hunting here all day today, and I've seen does in the field and not even young bucks coming out and bumping them. So I'm not sure what's going on, to be honest with you. The movement was really slow from all the guys that I talked to. And it's rifle season here in Kentucky, and I didn't hear but 10% of the shots that I normally do. So on this spot that you're talking about, for those guys who are trying to put a plan together to go somewhere for a rut location, what were the things that are the characteristics of this spot that kind of earmark it as a rut only stand? Is it a funnel? Is it just a place that does are always at? Give us a little detail about it.
Well, it's a smaller property that is surrounded by bigger properties that just get a whole lot more hunting pressure. So during the month of October, the bow hunters are stomping the areas around this, and they're just pushing more and more does onto this place.
Mm.
So by me staying away, the does just stay there. I've got my stands in place. I'm not stomping in there putting a stand up. I mean, they're in place ready to go. And then when the time's right, early in the rut, when the bucks are searching, that's when I get in there and, um, twice now I've got it done the first day.
Right.
But I always see some good bucks there. Last year on my rut report, one of the biggest bucks that I passed up last year, I got some good video footage of him, and I posted that on my rut report one day last year.
Right.
So I always have a chance at a really good buck on this property.
So don't pressure it early, and make sure you have the right conditions when you go in, right?
Exactly. That's where it comes down to discipline. We keep talking about discipline. Um, you got to stay away until the time's right. Have your stand ready for sure. Get that ready in the winter ahead of time, but then stay away until the time's right, and then get in there and get it done.
Right. Well, for as hot as your week was, mine was pretty cold because I didn't get to go hunting one time. I hunted all day last Sunday, and then I had a big event at work and ended up putting in about 14 to 16-hour days every day this week. So today, Saturday the 9th, was the first day that I was able to get back in the woods, taking my son Jonathan rifle hunting here in Kentucky. I'm already tagged out in Kentucky, so we're going to hit it again tomorrow. But since you're tagged out in Illinois, what was the plan for you midweek?
Well, I've got a property in Ohio that I just purchased this summer. I purchased it with a partner from West Virginia, and this partner has access to all kinds of heavy equipment. So we went in July, and he brought dozers and track hoes and skid loaders and the whole 9 yards, and we cleared a 10-acre food plot on this property. Got it planted with real world deadly dozen in September. But I had not ever been over there to hunt this property during the early season.
So this is the first year you had it?
It's the first year I've had it. And this past week was the first the first trip in to hunt. We had trail cameras back in September. We put a couple of 360 blinds up along the edge of that food plot, and also hung several trail cameras, and we'd not even checked those. So
you headed up there, what, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that?
Yep. Wednesday morning, and hunted Wednesday afternoon, and all day Thursday, and then Friday morning, and then I headed home. And a lot of people are saying, well, why'd you head home, in the middle of the rut? You only been there 2 days. Well, there was two reasons. First of all of those cameras that we had there had not shown a shooter buck since September when we put them out. The other reason is I've got a friend coming in from Ohio tomorrow, and I had some work around the farm I needed to get done before the weather gets bad. So I came back home to get that work done, and I'll be headed back to Ohio. I figure there's enough does on that property. There's going to be a good buck there. So,
well, especially in late season with the food, that deadly dozen's going to produce, different foods are going to come palatable at different times, and it should draw some different deer in late season.
And this property is fantastic. It's 160 acres, and it's 150 acres of the thickest, nastiest bedding cover you can imagine, and 10 acres of food. And I'm going to go back probably Thanksgiving week or so towards the tail end of the rut. And I'd expect a good buck to be in there with the does that we got. And if not, the late season should be fantastic with the food that we got.
Well, depending on, since you're tagged out there or these trips back to Ohio, I know how you think. You're already looking, targeting, and getting plans for next season, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. One of the reasons I was glad to get so much work done today here on the farm was it's going to clean up my schedule that I'm going to be in the woods this coming week. I've got the friend from Ohio is coming for 3 days, but he'll be gone by midweek, and I'll be hitting the woods because one of my goals has long been to shoot a gross booner on public land. So I'm going to be covering. I don't have one found yet, but I'm going to cover a lot of ground looking for one. Um, and also, as I sit in my stands, I'm always taking notes on my phone. And what can I do to make this stand better? And when it gets into December and January, I'm doing so much with trade shows and also my consulting business that I don't have as much time as I'd like to be doing the work that I need to do. But
Right.
killing these 2 bucks has cleared up my schedule a little bit now, so I can get some of this work done.
Right. All right. Well, it came off a really good week, so hopefully I can turn it on next week, and I'll be traveling up to Illinois possibly next weekend to hunt. Hopefully, lockdown won't be a problem, and we'll have some cruising around that I can try to get on. So let's transition into our Big Buck Serial Killers segment, where it references a past article that you wrote for a publication. And why don't you go over what we've talked about so far and what this week's characteristic is?
All right, this is actually going to be our last episode for this series on profiling big buck serial killers. And basically, several years ago, I wrote a magazine article of that title and detailed out some of the things that these guys that consistently put big bucks on the ground, what do they have in common? And we discussed the fact already on previous episodes that these guys are all loners. They respect the wind. They have killing big bucks is high on their list of priorities, and the attention they pay to details. They don't leave anything to chance if they can control what they do. This week we're going to talk about confidence. These guys, these big buck serial killers, are all confident. Um, they don't go into each season hoping they're going to kill a big buck. They expect to kill one every year. It's just that positive mindset, I think, that keeps them going. And just like what happened with us in October this year, where things just didn't happen, never give up. We just keep plugging away, and that's the mindset that these big buck serial killers take to the woods each season. They don't get too down if they have a bad hunt, and they don't get too up if they have a good hunt. They just keep plugging away, and they expect that sooner or later this season there's going to be a big buck come by, and they're going to kill him.
Yeah. I think this is probably one of the biggest differences. I mean, we have different hunting styles and are obviously at different points in what our goals are and our careers, but I get down a whole lot more than you do. For whatever reason, whether it's, I have a very demanding job and still have young kids at home and a little bit more limited time than you do. And man, I mean, I get that pep talk from you all the time. Terry, you have properties to hunt. You have good bucks to target. You'll get it done. Suck it up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's some of that comes with age, I think, and experience. I mean, once you've been through the war as many times as I have, you know what's coming. You just, if you're not prepared when your opportunity does come, then that's when failure happens. That's when you miss him or your bow's hanging on the hook and you got an equipment issue or whatever.
Right.
If you know you're going to get your opportunity, then you stay prepared.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's like coming out of October. When I left your house last Saturday, you're like, I'm going to get it done. And I think you even said on last week's podcast that there might even be a chance you kill two in one day or back-to-back days, and sure enough, you do it. But I think I have to do better at this because, I have some access to some great properties, and there's still bucks alive on those properties that are just absolute whoppers. But sometimes I just still doubt myself that it's going to happen.
Well, you know what? you also live out of state from where some of your better bucks are. So I'm sitting here where I can go hunting just about any day I want, and even if I've got work to do, I can pick and choose when I do my work and when I go hunting.
Yeah.
So that gives me a big advantage. But still, you gotta stay positive.
Right.
If you don't, I mean, I can't even. That's one reason I came home from Ohio is I can't sit in the stand if I don't believe that there's a big buck in that property
That's a great point.
or on that property. So
Right.
I packed up and went home. I mean, I just can't do it anymore.
Right.
I know what it takes to get it done. If I'm not confident, then I might as well go home.
Well, you have to
Um,
make the choice. You know that what you're going to be doing in around in Illinois for even next year, that's got a better return on it than sitting there waiting for something that you don't think's going to happen in Ohio. So go
right.
back, get your work done, prepare, and then see what happens late season. But you know the confidence that these guys have and that I've seen in you go back to the other aspects of that we've covered in past episodes because their priorities, their attention to detail, you know, their all of their effort and their strategy is so finely tuned to chase this passion that you guys have that ultimately just transforms right into a level of confidence where they expect they're going to get it done.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they've experienced past success,
Right.
it's not a new, it's not new to them.
Right.
So they've been there before.
Yeah. It's amazing to me that the people that are in, let's just call it the land consulting industry, that you know, people are hiring people to come and walk their properties and put plans together. That you got to have somebody that's got these profiles to them and the credibility and the track record before I'm even gonna let them come on my property and invest in that. It shocks me that people will still invest money into people that don't have this track record. But you know, whether or not it's a friend that you're asking advice to, but or somebody you're paying as a land consultant, or a company that you're looking to use their products and invest in. I think you look at the people that are behind it or the people running it and say, what type of people are there and what are their accomplishments and what have they been able to bring to the industry before you make that final decision.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not gonna start bashing other consultants since I am one, but you know, if you go to my website, higginsoutdoors.com, there's a section on there about consultants and what you should look for when you hire a consultant. There's a lot of questions you should be asking, and if if the guy has never done what you want to do, well, why would you pay him to tell you how to do it?
Right.
I mean, a lot of these guys don't know any more than the clients that are paying them.
Right.
So,
So
again, not to bash anyone, but
no, and
you
it's
need to
just
think.
it's just a matter of, you know, it's surrounding yourself or using products or trusting people that are going to make you better. And there has to be
Yep.
some type of credibility and track record that goes with that. And that's the thing I most appreciate about our friendship over the last 15 years is I just try to be a sponge. Now, everything that you do is not applicable to me here in Kentucky on my farm, and that's okay. But the overall gist and strategy has a lot of similarities and parallels that I can learn from. So,
Mhm.
with that, why don't we take a quick break and bring in the buyafarm.com property of the week.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
All right, this week's featured property is 119 acres in Jackson County, Illinois. The property is just outside the town of Carbondale. And I've actually been to this property myself, personally walked on it and seen it. It's got a 25-acre lake with a duck blind. 30 acres is tillable. It's got a log cabin or a home, a couple of outbuildings, a garage, and a pole barn. Um, if hunting is your deal, then this one's one to take a look at, because not only do you have the waterfowl hunting on that lake, but there's good whitetail and turkey hunting as well. The property has a half a mile of road frontage, rural water. There's potential to develop the property. You could subdivide around that 25-acre lake. Just a lot of different potential for different interests, whether it be hunting or whatever. If you want to see this property, Mark Kennedy is the agent you want to talk to. Mark's phone number is 618-924-1747. And again, it's 119 acres total, just outside of Carbondale, Illinois. And you can find more details, aerial photos or whatever, on the buyafarm.com website.
So if it's 119 acres and 30 acres tillable, 25-acre lake, it's got to have a lot of timber on it then, right?
It doesn't have a whole lot of timber. I don't even want to say, because it'd just be a guess on my part. Around the lake is mostly grass areas.
Okay.
There is some timber on the one end of the property.
All right. So I mean, is there a good bit of cover then?
Oh yeah,
grown up.
yeah. There's certainly. It has a lot of potential. That 30 acres of tillable could be planted into, warm season native grasses. Real world switchgrass or bedding in a bag would be ideal.
Right.
Also food plots. So I mean, you
somebody looking for a property that they could immediately first year get in there and have a great time hunting. This isn't a long-term project to turn it into something then.
Oh no, they'd be shooting deer, turkey, and waterfowl right out of the gate, and it's a really good property for someone who doesn't like specialize in just deer hunting or whatever, because
right.
You can go duck hunting this morning and deer hunting this evening, and just a lot of different opportunities there.
And Mark Kennedy is the agent on that. Why don't you give his phone number one more time if people don't want to go to the buyafarm.com website?
Yeah, you can see this property or get more information from Mark Kennedy at 618-924-1747.
And we really appreciate the opportunity to represent a property every week. Buyafarm.com is a super partner of ours, and we want to thank them for giving us the opportunity to relay these properties to you. But they offer a lot of other properties beyond what we talk about every week, because you're committed to knowing about this property, not just reading something off a paper. You've walked these properties, right?
Yeah, actually, I've made a commitment to buy a farm that I'm going to see these properties that we feature. But you bring up a very good point, Terry. We're featuring one property at a time per episode. If you go to the Buy a Farm website, you can see dozens and dozens of properties that they've got listed. So,
right.
So
they specialize
if you're in the market,
in a lot of rural properties for all different kinds of. If you just want to farm, if you want to hunt, a lot of different opportunities and different price points and styles of property. So please visit their website. They have a lot to offer if you're in the market for some land.
Absolutely.
All right, so once again, there's a lot of people wanting a free T-shirt, but I hope there's a lot of people that's visiting ChasingGiants.com and possibly buying a T-shirt off of there. I know you have them up for sale, but if we use your listener-submitted question on air, you're going to be sending them out a free Chasing Giants shirt. Which, by the way, I didn't get mine while I was in there. We forgot. So I'm still without a Chasing Giants shirt. I guess I'll have to submit a question.
There you go. If you submit a question, Terry, I'll make sure that I pull it out next week, just so you can have a T-shirt.
All right.
No, we just got the T-shirts in about a week ago, so we shipped a pile of them out. If we've used your question, you should be getting your T-shirt pretty quick. We've also sold several on the website, and those were shipped out as well. But anyway, we got a couple more guys going to be getting free T-shirts this week
So
because we selected their questions.
yeah, won't we start with the first one?
All right, the first one was from Jesse Fromm, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's from New Berlin, Illinois. And Jesse says, with technology constantly adding value to everything we do, have you considered offering a service in which you review satellite maps, topography maps, and anything else necessary to provide a hunting plan for a discounted price? As much as I would love to have you consult, it is not a possibility for me after paying for a lease and all my hunting gear. I do what I can do to improve the property, but can only do it to the best of my knowledge. Maybe by reviewing these maps and spending a few hours, this service could be provided at a much lower price for the rest of us. Well, Jesse, there was a time when I used to mark aerial maps for people. I didn't do it very long, just a couple of years. And then my consulting business really exploded. And, before I take on a consulting client, the first thing I do is I ask the person to send me an aerial of their property, an aerial map, and then there's a series of about 10 questions that I ask. I just want to get a good feel for their situation, what their goals are, what other activities are taking place on that property, what the neighboring properties are like, or what they're willing to do to achieve their goals, what their goals are. Um, and then I'm looking at the aerial as well to see if that's really a potential. And many times, I mean, I get an idea in my head of what I'm going to do with that property before I ever show up, just based on that aerial photo. And I'm going to say a minimum of 70% of the time, maybe 80% of the time, once I put feet on the ground and walk a property, whatever idea I had in my mind from the aerial is totally thrown in the garbage.
Wow.
It just, once you see it,
It makes that
there's
much
just
difference.
absolutely, there's no substitution for boots on the ground. And whenever I started recognizing that what I see on the aerial, I'm just trashing the plan I've come up with in my head, then how can I charge somebody for that? I just wouldn't feel right um, taking somebody's money to send them a plan that 70 or 80% of the time is no good. And I understand the question in your situation. Believe me, um, when I was young, I was dirt poor. I mean, my wife and I, we had our electricity shut off more than once, our phone shut off more than once. We had stacks of bills we could hardly pay. And I've been there, and I understand, and I feel for folks that are in that situation. The pricing of my consulting has just been based on the demand, and when the demand gets more than I can handle, I just raise the price a little bit to kind of even it out. I wish I had a better answer for you, but that's just the honest truth.
Well, I
Is
think it
that
also
I don't.
goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the big buck serial killers is if somebody is out there just to give you a quick answer, I think they're just wanting your money. And I know
Yep.
you won't say that, but I will.
Okay.
I know you don't want to bash other consultants and call them out, but if somebody just says that they can look at a aerial and a topo and put a full plan together and write me a check or transfer money in PayPal, I don't know that their intentions are really outside of anything other than making it a job. This is a passion for you where you want your clients to achieve their goals, whatever those are. And I think you're saying that you just can't do that. You might be able to give some ideas or some direction, but to put the plan together that you do for your clients, you just can't do it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking the ball and running with it there, Terry. But I will go so far as to say, I don't believe anyone should be paying anyone to mark an aerial map. It's the advice that you're going to get is just so limited, um, and often going to be wrong. You just can't do it. It's like throwing darts at a board. Where's it going to hit? Um, I don't think anybody should be paying anyone else to mark an aerial map because if they want to do it for free, yeah, go ahead and let them. But you shouldn't be paying somebody for that.
Well, another great example of this is earlier this summer, our friends from Lone Wolf leased a property that's pretty close to some of my ground, and you and I went down there, and you had actually kind of said check out a couple places and marked them on a map. You didn't say hunt there, you just said check it out, right?
Exactly.
Well, we were down there, and you and I just said they were busy hanging a stand and that kind of stuff, and we were just sitting around watching, not being much help. So we jumped on my side by side and started driving. It's a pretty big piece of property, and we found just an absolute honey hole that we're pretty confident that somebody's going to have the opportunity at a decent buck. But we wouldn't have known that if it would have been just looking at an aerial.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. I marked the aerial for them guys. I said, here's some places to check out based on the aerial only. I'd never been there. And then you and I showed up when they were there, and we looked at some of those spots that were marked on the aerial. They were worthless. They weren't worth putting that stand up.
Right.
And the best spot we did find is not one that I'd marked.
Right.
And that's a great example. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I mean, it was seeing transition area, topography, how dense some woods were, how thick others were, a big persimmon tree, some willow trees. So it kind of put the whole story together about what a buck 4 years old or older is going to do different than just every other deer around.
Right.
So.
Yeah, forget the marking of the aerial maps. Nobody can do it effectively.
But it's great.
Or their effectiveness is going to be very, very limited.
And for Jesse, I hear you, but all you can do is just keep working at it. Make the property as best you can. Don't overpressure it. That's the biggest thing. I think people that trump their property do more harm than what any land consultant's going to do positive to it. And that's something you can do on your own without anybody there on your property with you.
Yep.
All right, so we got another one.
Yeah, the next one comes from Justin Fallon. Justin is from Baltic, South Dakota. And he's got kind of a long one here, so I'm just going to read it and answer his question here at the end. It says, Don Terry, really enjoy the podcast. I am not a tech guy, so this is all new to me. Your book has been very helpful to me since I received it a few years back. I'm a family guy with limited time to hunt most of the time, but I have found a big buck close to home, so I have set more time aside to try to catch him this year. He has been showing up on my trail cam since August, but I actually discovered him last September 2018. My stands were set up in June, and other than some detailing of the stands and checking a trail camera occasionally, I have left the area alone. There are no other hunters on this 400-acre property.
Sounds promising.
Yep. So my question is this. I've heard that to kill big bucks, and in parentheses he says credit Roger Rothar, the wind has to be almost right for the buck and almost wrong for the hunter. While I understand that, I'm wondering if you could give me any tips on knowing when the right time might be to try and use the situation to my advantage. Obviously the rut, and I suspect when the temps drop, but is there anything that I am missing here? The does are coming by my stand, which is in a funnel on a semi-regular basis. There are in an abundance of food sources within easy reach for the deer and water too. There's a year-round water source in the funnel for them. Just wondering if you could give me any tips that I may not be thinking about. Thanks. Well, the first thing that jumps out to me is there's 400 acres here on this property that Justin has access to, but all I'm hearing is that he's got one stand up. Well, one stand's not going to cut it because one stand's going to be good for one wind direction, and the wind can blow from basically 8 different directions. So, most of the time you're only going to be able to hunt maybe one out of every 8 days and have a right wind for this stand. You need multiple stands. A 400-acre property ought to have, at least 4 or 5 good stands, maybe more than that. So that's the thing that really jumps out at me. But as far as when's the right time to use this situation as far as the wind? Well, every time you go hunting, you want to give the buck the wind to his advantage every time you go, or almost to his advantage on every hunt. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's about the best I can do without being there to show you some things.
Yeah, with 400 acres and he says he has a lot of food, I would assume he should have some early and late season spots already designated and ready for hunting over the food source. And, then like what you were saying about the wind direction, I've seen some of your places, Don, and 2 tree stands could be within 60, 70 yards from each other for 2 different winds. So it's just a matter of seeing it for us to comment really any more than that. But you have to have multiple setups for different conditions and different times of the year on a piece of property.
Exactly. The stand where I shot my first buck this past week, it's a stand that's probably no more than 70 yards from the blind where I shot Smoky. The difference is the Smoky blind takes a northwest wind, and the stand where I shot the buck this week takes a southwest wind. In both situations, we're giving the bucks the wind, but you just need multiple stands, and just by reading what you wrote, Justin, it just seems like you've got one stand on the whole property, and that's just not going to cut it.
Yeah. And he might. It's just the way the question was written and
Right.
the way we're interpreting it. But that's the best we can kind of offer to you based on the information that we have in front of us. So, But best of luck. It sounds like you got access to a great property. I wish I had a 400-acre block with cover and a bunch of trees on it. Most of our properties we end up getting is smaller pieces that we're letting everybody else push them to us.
Right.
So he can probably do some pretty good management on that. So, well, that's our last question for today. So, you got anything else you want to close with? We're at the kind of towards the end. I know it's going to be at least 4 or 5 days before I get back up there. So, what do you envision for the status of the rut and lockdown to be?
Yeah, the bucks are going to be locked down by the time you get back, Terry. But in fact, it's probably starting to happen right now. Within 2 days, I expect most of the big bucks are going to be locked down. But my week, I've got the friend from Ohio that's coming for 3 days. I'll be taking him out and see if we can get him a buck. And after he's gone, I'll be hitting the woods hard. I'll be checking some trail cameras, but also going to spend some time on the public land, see what I can find. This is the time of the year to do things like that because I can see where the other hunters are concentrating their efforts.
Right.
See if I can find some hidden spot that nobody's seems to be messing with, and see if I can find some good buck sign.
Good deal. So I think that's going to wrap up episode 6 of Chasing Giants, brought to you by BuyAFarm.com. We really want to thank all of our sponsors that help us beyond BuyAFarm.com: Lone Wolf Tree Stands, Matthews Archery, 360 Hunting Blinds, Real World Wildlife Products, Vortex Optics, and Quiet Cat Bikes. So I hope I'll be sending you a text tomorrow with Jonathan, a buck down in Kentucky. And
I hope so.
We want to wish everybody good luck and stay safe out there. So on behalf of Don Higgins, we're going to wrap up for episode 6 of Chasing Giants. Take care.